All right, so today I am going to be demonstrating how to do a gradient wash. This one is going to be a straight gradient wash, and then I'll also do a gradient wash with 3 different colors. So the first thing I have to do is mix up my color. You need a color to be very liquidy, and I like to use little clear cups to do this because you can actually see the color range that you're mixing up. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that up. So at this point I have a color that is dripping all over my paper. I have a color that is in this container here. And at this point it looks pretty dark, but what I can do is I can test this color out. I can take a paper towel and I can take a little bit of this color and I can dab it on a paper towel and see what the color density is. All right. I'm going to put a little bit more water in this just so I have enough for the gradient wash, and then I will go ahead and do that on this side of the paper here. All right. I'm using a brush that can hold a decent amount of water, and I also like to have a brush that's quite pointy because that way I can get into fine detail lines. So my brush is very loaded with water at this point, and I'm only using the water that I've mixed up with the color at this point. What I want to point out as well is this bead of water that is going down the page. I've put my page on a slight slant and I'm using gravity to allow the paint to go down the page rather than pulling up higher in the page. It is depositing the pigment, and as I go down it will allow the pigment to settle in a very smooth fashion at this point. When I'm using the brush, I'm going very lightly and I'm pulling that bead of water along. I'm not pushing very, very hard with the brush. If I did that, the pigment would lift up. And I will just continue going down the page like this. You want to do this in a very smooth, consistent motion. If I stopped at any point and came back to it a few minutes later, I would have a line along my page because the water would have dried along that line. Don't worry about that. That will be picked up very, very shortly. And then when I get to the bottom of the page, ignore the cat. At the bottom of the page, I have this bead here. I'm going to dry off my brush, and then I'm going to lift that bead and dry that off. Lift it again and dry that off. All right, so at this point I have a very smooth gradient. Normally I would blow dry this, but I'm going to hop over to this side of the page to demonstrate the 3 colors that I want to do. I want to make sure that I have 3 distinct colors so you can see the transitions that we're going to be doing. So I'll still use that blue that I had a moment ago, but I also need to mix up 2 other colors. So the colors that I'm going to be using, I've got, and I want to clean off my brush before I do that. So I'm mixing up a gold tone here. So much for that. So you'll notice that where I've just dropped off water, it will. All right. Okay, so let me just soak that up, and yeah, we'll get a little bit. So at this point, I have 3 different colors mixed up. All right, so at this point, I want to do a gradient wash where I'm changing colors in between. I have a blue that I'm going to start with, and this is going to be very similar to the technique that I did just a moment ago, where I'm taking this across the page. I want it quite wet. taking it down and across. I kind of think of this kind of like a typewriter where you're going across and then down and across and down. You always want to make sure that you have a decent amount of water. They don't call it watercolors for nothing. It is very, you'll have this bead of water at all points. All right, I'm going to take my brush and rinse it out with clear water. And I'm going to go straight into my next color, which is kind of this pinky tone. I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to connect it directly to that bead of water that I've already got going. Taking it down and across, and down and across. Okay. Now I want to switch to my third color. I'm going to rinse off my brush one more time, putting it into my third color, and just melding it with the last bead that we had. Again, I'm being very smooth and relatively rapid and deliberate about this. If I stopped at any point, it would not work. All right, I've gotten to the bottom of my page. If I let this sit for just a moment, the excess water will drop to the bottom of the page. You can see the bead is getting a little bit larger right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my towel, and you always want to have a towel in your hand, dry off the brush, and then soak up that last bit of water. Thank you very much for joining me for the gradient wash, and I look forward to seeing you soon.